When you close your eyes and picture home, what do you see? Maybe it's safety or it's rest. Maybe it's the smell of dinner cooking and laughter spilling out of the kitchen. Now imagine a world where everyone had that, where home wasn't fragile and it wasn't something you could lose. This is What If, where we imagine the world as it could be and meet the people building it now. I'm Daydriane, and I'm glad you're here. Today we're asking, what if rent didn't exist? What if we lived in a world where no one's home could be taken away because they couldn't afford it? For generations, we've been told that poverty is personal failure, that if you just work harder, plan better, save more, you'll make it. That story has never been true. Before we start, there's one idea that Natalie Foster talks about that might be new: guarantees. When she says guarantees, she's talking about the public systems that make sure everyone has basic security, like housing, healthcare, and childcare. So, what does it take to make this what if real? Today, we are joined by Natalie Foster, a voice and leader in shaping a future where the economy actually works for everyday people. She spent years building organizations and movements that push our country toward more fairness and security. And she wrote the book, The Guarantee, which invites us to imagine a future and an economy that is built on security and dignity for everyone. Natalie, there's so much I could say about you and your work, but how would you introduce yourself and what you're most focused on right now?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm Natalie Foster. I'm president of Economic Security Project, and I'm focused on building economic power for everyone.
Oh, beautiful. So, in your book, The Guarantee, you write about an economy that provides housing as a right. If that were true today, what would home feel like for an everyday family? What would it open up for them?
Yeah, the guarantee of housing is one of the guarantees that I got to explore. And I spent a lot of time with Tara Raghuveer, who is an organizer based in the Midwest who has launched a national tenants union to advocate for a housing guarantee. And it's spending time with organizers like her and her members who have started to imagine what it would look like to live in a world where housing was a right, where everyone had access to housing that they could afford, that there was a floor, right, through which
Mm.
no one could fall. And it would mean that families weren't stressed about, making the rent every month and knowing where they're going to be, month after month. It would mean that families could go to the doctor for preventative visits more because there was just a bit more breathing room, maybe the dentist. It would mean that families could afford to buy the soccer kit at the beginning of the soccer season and not stress about it. The kid outgrows the gear at starting the soccer season with everything they need was something that one parent named as really important to her. And it really struck me as the kind of thing that everyone deserves to be able to provide for their families. And it only works if there's economic security and a floor for families.
Yeah, and we actually kind of saw like a glimpse of that during the pandemic. We saw eviction pauses and support for people that seemed impossible. What did those moments reveal to you about how quickly the rules can change when we decide to protect people?
Yeah, I love your question. How quickly the rules can change, right? Because for so long we've said, look, housing is left entirely up to the private market. It's very local, there's nothing we can do. And then all of a sudden, a pandemic hit, and there was an economic crisis unfolding alongside a health crisis. And we as a nation decided it was not safe for people to live on the streets. And we did something about it, right? We passed laws that allowed us to buy hotels and to move the unhoused in, giving people who are on the streets a room with a key of their own, right? They could shut the door and lock it for the first time.
Hmm.
We passed an eviction moratorium. We saw governments getting in the business of starting to build housing in their communities, like Montgomery County, Maryland, that's saying we're not just going to leave this up to chance and the private market. Yes, that plays a role, but we're also going to get involved in ensuring that there's a floor of housing in this county. So it was extraordinary to see overnight. Now, unfortunately, so many of those things also slipped away. But the good news is we have a blueprint for how
Mm,
it could look if we decided to take on industrial policy for housing and decide this is something we're serious about in the United States.
yeah. And do you think that memory or that moment in time is still shaping the conversation around what's possible, or are we already kind of losing that blueprint?
I think that we all hold so much collective trauma from
Mm,
the pandemic period that
yeah.
there's a way in which talking about it brings up all kinds of associations that folks have. So I think that we all remember something extraordinary and terrible happened then. And I think we do forget, in the midst of that, we kind of forget the policy shifts that were profound.
Yeah.
We had the lowest number of uninsured Americans in regards to health insurance that we've ever had in history during a health crisis, right? Because we got closer to a healthcare guarantee than ever before because we decided it was important and we
Mhm.
expanded the existing systems we had in a profound way.
Yeah.
We cut child poverty in half. We had the lowest poverty rates in history. In history, since we began recording poverty, in the midst of the pandemic because we sent people checks. We decided it was important that folks had the breathing room to take care of themselves and their families during a crisis. So I think it's important to keep naming that, particularly because here we sit at the advent of an economy in the age of AI, where
Yep.
we know there's going to be profound shifts in the workforce, and there will be more crises. So we have a blueprint for how we can react when we get the political will.
Yeah. I love that. You talk about guarantees as a way to shift what people believe they deserve. How do you even explain that idea to someone who hasn't thought about guarantees before?
Well, one thing that's important is to realize the guarantees exist in today's world, but largely for business
Yeah.
and the wealthy, right? The guarantee of the patent system, the guarantee of the courts, the guarantee that we will have a stable currency, and that even shareholders shouldn't be held liable for misdoings that a company has. They're
Yeah.
guaranteed that right. So I'm just arguing we should guarantee a baseline of economic security for everyone in this country, right? Who actually make up the American economy, the people who work day in and day out to build this country, that we should have a guarantee of the good life.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard though to like unlearn that story of scarcity, really, that's just how things are. Like there's so much money around these businesses and companies and they have more legal protection than us, so they're more important than us. How can we break through that mindset?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right because the dominant story that we're told is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Mhm.
And if you don't do that, then it's your fault. You've done something wrong. You've made a bad decision, right? You bought avocado toast when you should have been squirreling away that 2, 3 extra dollars.
You bought a latte.
You bought the latte. And instead, it's a structural system that is designed to move money up to the wealthy and has resulted in flatlining wages for generations,
Yeah.
despite increased worker productivity, and that it's not a result of bad decisions. So unlearning that is incredibly hard. And with that story, though, the one we're both naming, comes a lot of shame
Yeah.
that people feel when they can't make it today. And by making it, I mean when they can't provide for their family in the way they want to, when they can't live life on their own terms, when they feel stuck in a job that doesn't pay enough to make ends meet, but they can't quit or spend extra time finding another job because, they're working 8, 9 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that's the kind of shame that is created in people that I think really starts to trust
Yeah.
erode trust in institutions, trust in other community, and you see kind of how that spirals out and becomes part of the reason I think we're seeing an erosion of trust and democracy in general.
Mhm.
And so with a news story that says actually we as a society can in fact create a floor through which
Yeah.
no one can fall, then you can see how there would be more trust involved, more possibility open, more time opened up for people to engage with the PTA and the city council, and sort
Yeah.
of an upward spiral for not only families, but our democracy as well.
Yeah. What are some other stories about deservedness or scarcity that you are most often pushing back against in your work?
Well, I think the scarcity narratives, right, the idea that we don't have enough are
Yeah.
often very racialized.
Mm.
The idea that when Black or Brown or immigrant communities gain, that white communities lose. And, Heather McGhee wrote a seminal book on this topic, The Sum of Us, looking at this idea of zero sum politics. Because in truth, when there have been universal guarantees, public school, social security, libraries, clean water, that we've grown prosperity for everyone, for
Yeah.
white communities and Black communities and brown
Yep.
communities and immigrant communities. And that is the promise of this country that has yet to be realized, but that is the promise. So I think that is one important aspect of the scarcity narrative to name.
Yeah. How do you personally keep your imagination open and your hope alive in this work, especially right now?
You know, I think that quote you and I have both loved over the years is the Mariama Cave quote that's like, hope is a discipline.
Yeah.
Um, that it requires a lot of work, especially in this day and age. You know, the quote is sort of get offline and go touch grass.
Right.
I think that's right, but I would actually say differently. I'd say go touch people.
Yeah.
Go be with people, go be with your people, go be with people who are in motion, who are doing something, whether it be mutual aid or on the streets protesting or even just attending a, city council meeting on behalf of a larger community. Be with people who are in motion because you will rediscover that sense of hope and inspiration, which is particularly important in these dark times.
Yeah. What about with those people that may not have the same experience or know-how as you? They're just like everyday people. What is one small step or one thing that they can take in their own lives or communities to lean into the idea of guarantees?
Mm. That's such a good question. If someone isn't like a professional
Mm.
activist or an activist in their life, what do they do if they're inspired by the guarantees? A couple of ideas I have, and I'd love to hear what you have. One
Okay.
is people could make art, right? Like art that explains the basics of how everyone should have a house, everyone
Yeah.
should have healthcare, everyone should have access to family care. Everyone should have higher education. That, in fact, in many points in this country's history, these things have been seen as public goods,
Mhm.
an understanding we have lost over the last 50 years, and then
Yeah.
understanding it wasn't possible actually for many communities during that period anyway. So art, I think that like brings that up, and today art can happen across TikTok and YouTube and Twitch and other
Yeah.
places where people are creating in all kinds of ways. I'm always inspired by that. What
Me
about you?
too.
People what have you seen people do, or what do you think people could be doing?
Hmm. I think it's so normalized to just like keep going and going and going and going until you can't anymore, but, like, really giving myself intentional time for rest really counters that, like, I guess the deservedness narrative that there's something I have to do to earn rest or there's something I have to do to earn something rather than me just being worthy of that, and why can't I have rest all the time? Yeah, that's one thing, just giving myself intentional time to rest to remind myself that I need that and that's not, like, a gift or a luxury.
I really love that. That in fact, a world where we had the guarantees would be a world where we had more time to breathe, and that
Yeah,
would be more
yeah,
rest and play.
yeah,
I like that. It's an old labor, the old labor slogan was like bread and roses.
mm,
People need the bread, but they also need the roses,
yeah,
and that they're both important.
it's
I don't
beautiful.
wanna lose that.
Me neither. So, since we spend this time asking what if, imagining a world that's never been, we also need to hear some answers. So, let's close with this. If there was no rent, what kind of world will we be living in? What would it sound like, feel like, look like? Natalie,
Mm.
what's your answer?
It would look like children playing outside. Uh, it would look like, parents gathering, after work because there was spaciousness, there was community, there was time to put into community. It would look like shared meals. It would
Mm,
look like the freedom to play, to rest, to work, to contribute your talents where you choose to contribute your talents, right? That's the world that's possible. And I even think that world is possible with rent, but
mm,
just affordable rent, right? Rent that's kept stable
yeah.
like we're seeing in Montgomery County, Maryland, right, where the county is building housing that's kept off the speculative market and
Mm,
kept stable for working families. So that is a world I feel like we could build today if we put our
right.
minds to it.
Natalie, thank you so much for helping us imagine what true security could look like.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back here next time with a new question and new answers. Thanks for being here with us. This is What If, a podcast by Common Futurists. What If is hosted and produced by me, Daydriane Chapman. Cover art is by Kat Janes. Music is by Sam Barsh and Luna Ray. For more What If content, follow us on Instagram at Common Futurists. The future starts in our imagination and in our inbox. Send your thoughts and dreams to whatif@commonfuture.co.